You sit down at your desk with a clear goal. You intend to focus on a single important task. But within minutes, you check a notification, open a tab, reply to a message, and suddenly you're completely derailed, buried in a digital rabbit hole. This chart shows the average amount of time a knowledge worker spends on a single screen before switching to another. According to longitudinal data from researcher Gloria Mark at UC Irvine, that average time was about 2.5 minutes in 2004. By 2020, it had plummeted to roughly 47 seconds. We often call this multitasking, but tech writer Linda Stone argues it is actually a state of continuous partial attention. We aren't rapidly switching tasks to be highly productive. We are operating on high alert, driven by a fear of missing out and a compulsion to remain a live node on the network. We are participating in a global ecosystem where our attention is the product. Alphabet and Meta generate hundreds of billions of dollars a year in digital advertising revenue, a model entirely dependent on keeping our eyes locked on their platforms. Our fractured focus represents a deliberate bankruptcy. It is an extraction of our most valuable cognitive resource by outside forces. Global digital advertising is expected to exceed $700 billion by 2025. To capture that money, platforms have to capture your time. The longer you scroll, the more ad impressions they can auction off. To maximize that time on screen, platform algorithms actively optimize for emotional intensity. Studies from MIT and the National Academy of Sciences show that divisive, outrage-inducing rhetoric generates significantly more clicks and shares than moderate, factual nuance. This algorithmic weaponization has collective consequences. Affective polarization in the US has nearly doubled since the mid-1990s, and we continually see how emotionally charged digital narratives mobilize large crowds and escalate into real-world events. The success of the digital economy at a macro level relies directly on breaking our individual ability to sustain rational, measured thought. To understand how this works on an individual level, we have to look at cognitive load theory. The human brain's working memory, the mental workspace where we process active information, is extremely limited. It can only hold roughly 3 to 5 chunks of information at a time. The first penalty is the reload cost. If you switch from drafting a complex report to reading a Slack message, you dump all the mental rules of the report and load the message's context into those 5 slots. Going back means rebuilding that framework from scratch. Then comes the residue cost. When you switch away from unfinished work, lingering thoughts create attention residue. It operates exactly like leaving a dozen resource-heavy tabs open in a web browser. Your processing power slows to a crawl on your current task because a fraction of your working memory is still worrying about the previous one. Finally, you pay the recovery cost. A 30-second distraction rarely costs just 30 seconds. Gloria Mark's research shows that one interruption typically leads to 2 or 3 additional app switches before you finally circle back, heavily compounding the time it takes to reach full focus again. And practice does not make this easier. Stanford researchers found that heavy media multitaskers actually perform worse on task switching and memory tests than light multitaskers. They don't get better at focusing, they just build a tolerance for shallow attention. Every time you toggle away from your primary screen, you trigger this 3-part tax, quietly bankrupting your working memory and systematically destroying your capacity for deep work. Continuous partial attention keeps the mind in a state of artificial crisis. The result is a measurable spike in chronic stress and anxiety that persists long after the workday ends. At stake is your cognitive autonomy, the capacity to consciously direct your own focus without algorithmic interference. The threat is so severe that legal theorists are beginning to push for frameworks to regulate attentional intrusion. Just as the law protects our physical homes and our digital data, there is a growing argument that our mental space must be treated as a legally protected domain. Defending our minds starts with a shift in perspective. We have to stop viewing our daily distraction as a personal failure of discipline and recognize it as a structural crisis of mental bandwidth. The damage is reversible. Researchers at Georgetown University found that executing a partial digital detox, like temporarily removing internet access from your phone, can improve sustained attention to a degree comparable to reversing 10 years of age-related cognitive decline. On a daily basis, you can fight attention residue using a tactic called a ready-to-resume note. Before you switch away from any task, write down 2 sentences, exactly where you left off and what your immediate next step is. This gives your working memory explicit permission to close the open loop. It externalizes the information, so your brain doesn't have to spend biological energy holding onto it. In an economy that rewards fragmentation, committing to a single task for an hour is a quiet act of resistance. The digital economy is engineered to extract and sell your attention. Guarding your cognitive budget ensures your mental energy remains yours to spend.